Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. So my name is Sonia Bunarjin, and I'm a product manager at Ytria. So in case this is the first time you're attending a Ytria webinar on sapio365, I wanted to say a few things about Ytria and sapio365. So we've been building tools for admins since 1999 for companies all over the world, and the latest edition has been sapio365, and is specifically geared to make Office 365 administration much, much easier. So why use sapio365? Well, unlike browser-based tools, sapio365 is a thick client installed onto a PC. This means that no data is accessed by Ytria servers. Office 365 admin centers are great for drill downs and everything, but what if you don't know what you're looking for? So sapio365 gives you global views to help you see things you wouldn't normally know to look for. And finally, once you find something of interest, you may want to change, to make some changes and maybe make them in on a mass scale. PowerShell is usually used for that, and it's great, but when you've got time for scripts and if it actually works. And you're usually going in blind. We show you what you're changing before you actually save those changes. And the ability to export anything you see gives you some custom reports that you can easily create. And finally, every action in sapio365 is a permission that's used in the built-in role-based access control system, and they can be combined in any which way and delegated in as a role on various tenants, but everything managed in one place. So this is the summary of what sapio365 is. And today, what we'll be looking at is the 4 of the top new features, well, 4 and 5 of the top new features of sapio365 in the release that we've published recently. The first one is a module about user sign-ins. So what it is that you'll see that users who have signed in into the various services and applications, including your guests. Next, the audit logs, which show user and admin actions in your tenants, such as updating groups or users, inviting guests, etc. Then we'll look at how we've made Office 365 usage reports much more informative. And finally, we've got some another feature, which is some transferring some user and group properties to subsequent windows, so that those grids are much, much richer. You'll see all this. We'll we'll look at each one in detail. Well, as much as we can in 30 minutes, right? And then finally, I'll show you how to schedule a report to run on a monthly basis. And this is thanks to the fact that we've enabled you to launch sapio365 from a command line. So let me just switch my sharing to my screen here. Okay, I hope everybody can see. Okay, great. All right, so before we start, I wanted to start with the user sign-ins and the audit logs. And before I do that, I just wanted to show you where that data comes from. So if you go into your Azure Active Directory Admin Center, you'll notice that down here in the monitoring section, you have your sign-ins and your audit logs. Now note, this gives you the last month, and it seems that this is the limit that you can reach. So July 23 was the earliest. And similarly for these audit logs as well. So everything here, if you have access to it here, then you will have access to it in sapio365. So depending if you have the role and the license for it. I know for sure that for sign-ins, you need a AD Premium license. If you don't have an AD Premium license, even if you use sapio365, unfortunately, you won't be able to see the sign-ins. There's just no way around that, sadly. So why did we make those two modules? Because if you look at your Azure Active Directory Admin Center, what you've got as tools to sort through all this verbosity is filters. Now, if you know what you're looking for, that's great because you can narrow it down to whatever you need. But it's very difficult to get the big picture, especially when you have to keep loading more, right? So that's my point. So without further ado, let's just go to sapio365 and look at how we have treated all this raw data. So this is our starting point. You've got your users, your groups, your SharePoint sites. And this section here is where you find everything that's related to your tenant. So your administrative roles, the licenses that you have subscribed to, the usage reports that were also implemented in the previous release. And these are the new ones, sign-ins and audit logs. So let's look at sign-ins. So note, you've got the same type of information here. And this column map will show you all the various properties that you have that you can pick from to display. Okay. So let's just make a very quick use case. What if we wanted to see which applications were signed into each day and who was doing the signing in, including your guests? So let's do that. If we go into the dates, if we want it daily, let me just change the group formatting, the date that I don't want to display the time, so I have a daily format. So all I have to do is make a quick grouping of application, date, and username. So this gives you a quick report of the applications that all your users have been signing into. And if you want to go further into each one, you just have to open them up, expand them basically. And even more, who has been signing in on which days. There you go. You'll note that Graph Explorer is pretty popular, but that's because we always test with Graph Explorer everything we do in sapio365. So these are very interesting. Take some time into looking at all the various properties here. There's some very peculiar ones. They are not always called the same as in the admin center, but they are the same data source. So moving on, let's go to the audit logs. So starting with the audit logs here. So just like for sign-ins, we get the same information you have in the Azure Admin Center. And these logs, these logs show actions that target users, groups, apps, and other resources, right, specifically. So if you have an admin team, you'll see what they have been up to. For example, let's say if we wanted to know who has updated which users successfully. So the actions that your administrative team has taken on users. I've already set some things up here. Oh, excuse me. Right, okay. So here all I've done is I've grouped by initiated by, which is basically the user who's done the action themselves, the operation, the action, the result, whether it was successful or not, the activity itself, and on the activity, the target of the activity. So I can see that Adele has assigned all these people to a group. I can go further and add the target, the group target as well to see even more details. So what this brings you is that it gives you the ability to create a report, but for every user that's done some actions. Or else, if you go into the admin center, you would have to look up each user. Now, another use case would be looking at guests. There is a certain activity that's called inviting guests. So let me just quickly do this. Oh. All right. If I group by activity, I have a list of all the different activities that have been done in my tenants, including inviting external guests. So you'll see this. You'll be able to see who, which guests have been invited right over here by the target. You can also see who invited them. If I look for initiated by, there you go. So Isaiah and Nestor have invited them. However, you don't see right away how they were invited, like which groups were they added to as part of the invitation, right? So what we can do is actually to change things around a little bit by looking at the user, at the target themselves. So if I look at the target, here I've got all my users, including my guests. If I want to do, if I want to just filter out my guests only, all I'd have to do was do a quick filtering on over here, and I only want to keep the ones that have ext. So here I have a list of all my external users. And if I expand them, I can see what was done to them. If I want to see which groups they were added to, I just have to find the target group. Excuse me, just a second. There's a lot of information here. And let's say new volume. Right, okay. So what's happening is like we're changing the memberships of these people. So it's the value of their membership is new. And you can see it's this group here. So you have a lot of information here that you can sort through. There's you can play with a lot of these different combinations, different groupings to see what makes sense for you and what kind of report that you would like. And of course, everything is exportable. So whatever you see here, you can export it very easily, quickly, you know, with this button. Now, moving on. Oh, by the way, if you have any questions at all, please use the Q&A panel. We have some panelists, and they'll be happy to answer any of your questions. Okay. So another thing, what we have a new feature in our new release is an add-on that we've created for usage reports. So usage reports are basically the ones that you find um, in your Office 365 admin center. You've got them here, usage. So you pick what you want. Let's say active users of Office 365. And this gives you everything. So gives you a global view of things. But what if you want to look for specifics or print something out for a report, right? So we've enabled this. However, the value add that we bring is that you can pick user properties to map to the users in the report, like department or country, in addition to whatever else Office 365 provides. So Office 365 through the Graph API gives you specific properties for each report in terms of, let's say, the user. You may not be able to see which country they're from, which office they're in. So what if that kind of geographical qualification, what if that was much more interesting to you in terms of their activity? For instance, let's look at Office 365 active users in the last 180 days. And let's add some extra bits here. Let's say some geographical components like department, city, and country. So when we do this, we make this grid a little bit wealthier in the sense that I have all my list of active users here, and I can see all the last dates that they've used a specific service. But I also have the department they're in, the city where they are located, and the country. So if I, let's say, group them by department, I can create a report that shows the activity of that specific department, and then maybe take some steps to remedy the situation with training targeted at that specific group. So use all those various user properties to make a little bit, to make your usage reports make more sense in terms of what you want to achieve. Okay. And similarly, those add-on properties, we can say, we've added the concept of adding on properties are present also in the main, in the users and for the groups. For instance, let's start with the users. Say I want to manage some group memberships for a bunch of new users that I've onboarded. But I want to add group memberships according to their department or geography, for instance. So let's say I select them all. Oh, sorry. Before I do that, I forgot to mention, if I want those extra bits of information, then I select them from over here. This is where the new thing is. You know, I've done this so many times, I kind of take it for granted that it's there. So the first time that you use it, this thing will pop up, this dialog will pop up, and you can just select any of these user properties that you have here. These are the same properties you have at the top over here, all along the line. So I've decided to keep the geographical information. And once you do that, any of these submodules that you go into to manage groups, licenses, files, messages, are going to have those properties transferred to them. So let's do that for group memberships. Okay. So I did this here already. And what I've done is I can see the groups that these users belong to. Say, for instance, this one. But I also have the location, the country location, the usage location, and the city. So let's say if I group them by city and I want to add people as per the city that they live in, all I have to do is open up each city, add to groups. Let's say I have a group here that's called Bellevue. So once I do that, I've added all the users here. Well, I mean, you have here some duplicates, obviously, because this is about the group memberships they have. So these two people that are situated in Bellevue are going to be added to the group Bellevue. And you can do the same thing for every other city. Now, I mean, this is just an example, but you can do this the same. It's the same principle for other properties that you can use, depending on what it is that you're trying to achieve. So if we look at groups now, so the same thing goes for groups. With groups, I have the choice of looking at managing their members, their owners, the way that they receive emails, the files that they have in their SharePoint document libraries, their calendar events, the channels for the teams, conversations, and so forth. So what if we want to do an analysis of SharePoint library documents, but with information like classification, for instance? You know, what if I want to know what kind of files are in those specific types of groups, or in the grand scheme of things, in all the groups, but how is it relative to other groups? So you can take this property with you onto the next submodule. So all I have to do is, if I select everything, I say show me all the files. I've already actually, here, I already have one ready here because it takes a bit of time. So I have all my groups here with the files that they contain and of course the hierarchy of those files. And at the end over here, oops, sorry. And I've got my transferred columns over here, the classification and the created on. And this was, if I go back here, these were set over here. I could easily pick some other properties that I would need for that. So here you go. So from here, whatever analysis you do will take into consideration these properties as well, the classification and when the group itself was created on. So if you need to make some decisions based on these factors, you're much more you're better equipped for it. So next, we've got schedule jobs. So before talking about scheduling a job, I wanted to show you in the main window of sapio365, we've added this job center configuration. So this, usually every module has its own job center configuration. This is new on the main one because we've added all the jobs we've added here. They don't require any selection. Usually in the other modules, you have to select maybe a bunch of users or groups and do a kind of query on them. Oh, for those of you who don't know, jobs are basically automation or automation tasks that are created by the various actions that you can take in sapio365. So all the data manipulation, the requesting of more information or relationships of users or groups can be automated. And we've done this for you. And what we've added here is that we've given the ability to download the existing jobs. You can modify them and then upload them back and run them. So they would really be custom jobs. And what I'm going to show you is exactly that. So for instance, I'm going to take this job here, find users who haven't signed in since the 30 days. So this job is basically looking at the sign-in module, looking at the last day all the users have signed in, and compares them to all the users in your tenant, and kind of does a subtraction in a way. And you get a list of all those users who haven't who haven't had any sign-in activity. So since the sign-ins are only available for the last 30 days, why not create a scheduled report that runs every month, right? So before we do that, we'll have to modify it a little bit. So all I have to do is export it. When you do this, you just select where you want to export it to. Once you export it out, you can open it up with Notepad++. That's the easier way, the non-programmer way of dealing with scripts, I guess. This is my original one on the left. And you can see it's pretty straightforward. It's really short. It's just launching the sign-in module, and like I told you before. So and on the right here is the modifications that I've done to it. So first, I just removed the user input for date. I'll just to say that just get all the 30-day sign-ins, right? So I removed it. And then I removed the date filter that is going to be used afterwards, since we don't need that anymore. And I've inserted a short export script indicating where my report should be downloaded to. And then finally, I've added this new one, which is a new automation script that you can that allows me to send a notification email with the downloaded report. So all I did was add this, modify my email. You can add as many emails as you want, a small subject line, and even a very simple HTML here in the message, with as well as the attachment file path that I had used for the export report. Now, it may seem complicated, but it's not, because if I can do it, honestly, you can do it. And we will be having, we will have some documentation that will help you do all this automation, and it's going to be broken down into specific actions. And that's how we deal with this kind of automation. It's like a puzzle you put together, and it could be quite fun, actually. Anyway, so after modifying all this, I saved it with a slightly different name, just so I know that I modified it. Once I modified it, I go back to my main window over here in the Job Center configuration. I import the job, and you'll see that it's right over here. And if you've noticed, these little cogs indicate that these are YTRIA created jobs. So whatever job that you import won't have them, and you're able to remove them, edit them, whatever you want. So if you click on it, if you double click on it, it's going to start running. So all I'm doing is opening up the modules that I need, And once it's done, it's just going to send me an email. Right, this is how we verify that the job works. So here I have a list of the users that haven't signed in. And really, if I want, I can just compare it. So what we've done is we've taken all these users, we've subtracted them from the full list of users here. Okay, so once it's done, it's done. Now, what if I want to, since we're going to schedule it, I need to make sure that I can run it from the command prompt. So what I need to do that is pretty simple, actually. So this is the format that we need for running it for the command prompt. I need the path of sapio365 executable file and the job key of the job. So the path is, you know, wherever you have your sapio365 execution file. And the job key is found right over here. Just open that up a little bit. So it's this. If I look at it, that's exactly that. So this is just the format that you use. And of course, J is for job. So let me add that up. Let me copy it and insert it into my command prompt. And if I do that, it's going to start a new sapio365 session. And we'll run the job just what you saw before when I double-clicked it. Finally, there you go. It's done. If I want to go further, and let me just check that it actually sent the email, right? Because you never know. So since I'm signed in by the address that I put in, I'm just going to check my messages. Oh, and let me, I'll take this opportunity to show another new feature here we have for messages. Before we were loading everything for each mailbox. Now we give you the option to choose the time frame. So if I sent an email in the last hour, I don't need to see everything else. I'm only interested in this email now. And I can choose whether to include private chats from Teams or not, and whether I want to have the preview, the body content, or the mail headers. Now, these things just slow your request down. So if you're looking through several mailboxes at the same time, if you have them off, it sure speeds up things quickly if you're just looking, let's say, for subject lines or something like that. So in my case, I just want to see the email that I sent myself. And here it is. If we look at the time, it was 10:32, so about a minute ago. Below the attachment, and the attachment is here. So if I want it, I can just download it from here. Okay, so now that we know that it works, let's schedule it. Open up my task scheduler. Once you open it, just create a basic task over here. Oops, let me just make it more visible. Create a basic task, give it a name, monthly report of sign-ins. I'm just going to put this in front of it so I can find it quickly later. Okay, if I do this monthly, set it up this way. Oops, what's happening here? Okay. Oh, I just have to pick the days, I guess. Why isn't this working? You can tell I don't use this task scheduler much. Let me just do this weekly. Okay. So now, anyway, after you get to this point where you say start a program, so you take the same script that you use to run in the command prompt, and just copy it there and say yes. And now that's it. And please don't look at this because there's something wrong with my scheduler. But I assure you it's going to run. So that's how you schedule a report that you use. Oh, and I think we're done for today. I know this was really very quickly. This was done very quickly. If you do have some questions, please let us know. Just send us a quick. Just 1 second. Send us a quick email or contact us through phone, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you so much for being here today. And I hope to see you next time.